Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today you join me in one of my favorite places, which is in the driver's seat of a E92 M3, and more specifically our Japan Red KA401 M3. So when BMW released the competition pack E92 M3, the suspension was actually quite a big step change from the standard E92 M3, and actually very good for road use. But that got us wondering, is there something that's slightly better? Now Bilstein have released a few years ago the EDC version of their B6 damper, and we were really keen to try it out. So what we're going to do in today's video is, while I familiarise myself with the suspension beforehand, fit a set of brand new Bilstein EDC 6 dampers and also a set of Intrax lowering springs, because we've used them in the past, and see how that combination works. So let's take a closer look at what we're going to fit today. Over here we've got the Bilstein EDC replacement dampers. So these are an OEM plus replacement for what's already on the car, and we've got Intrax springs over here. So the Bilstein EDC dampers come with extension cables because the orientation of the EDC wiring has changed. On the stock dampers it's at the top, and on these it's at the bottom. I haven't had any experience of these, either fitting them or driving a car with them, so it's going to be a new experience for me, but I have heard that these do make the car sit a little bit higher than stock, and it takes a little while for them to settle, but we will find that out. These Intrax springs lower 25mm front and 50mm rear on a stock E92 M3. Remember, ours is a competition pack, so it sits about 10mm lower than standard anyway, but we will get measurements of the car before and afterwards, and then after we've done some miles in the car we'll measure it once it's settled. I'm really looking forward to seeing what impact this makes on the car. As I've mentioned previously, that is not a track car for us, it's a Sunday driver. We want it to be an OEM plus upgrade for road use. So Aston's going to fit this now, and then I'll go afterwards for a drive and tell you what it's like. So the dampers and springs have been fitted to the car. Some of you may have noticed it looks slightly different. The carbon's off the front, there's a vent missing, and that's because we had the whole front end of the car repainted by Ish at Quattro Coachworks. He's done an absolutely fabulous job. And then it's gone to Andy at Unique Detail for a complete stage 2 polish and ceramic. But getting back to the dampers and springs in question, you can see the car sits slightly differently. So a common complaint that we've seen with these Bilstein dampers is that once they're fitted, the car does actually sit a little bit higher, and that is true at the moment. I have done 500 miles and the car has settled from the original ride height it was as soon as they were fresh. But even with the N-track springs, which lower 15mm rear and 25mm rear on a stock car, you can see that it hasn't actually lowered it that much. So it's sitting about 10mm lower at the front at the moment, and it's slightly higher at the back, maybe 5mm. So if we make our own custom version of this, there is potential for us to change the springs around and see if we can get the car sitting how we want it. But the most important thing about this setup is, how does it drive? Let's jump in the car and find out. I have been driving this car around for around 500-ish miles just to get used to the suspension, so this is not just a fresh review of how the car drives. You can feel the differences in all the modes. So if I put it in the soft mode, it's fairly compliant, and when you turn in, it's got a little bit of roll, but it's still very predictable. I put it in EDC setting 1, which is slightly stiffer. Immediately you can turn in and the car is a lot flatter through the corners, and that's what I've really noticed. And it's still actually fairly compliant and acceptable for a typical British B road for this, but it's just made the car feel a lot more nimble, and I think that is the key when you're changing suspension on a car like this. It's not the lightest car in the world, and when you get a real improvement in suspension, it's always making the car feel smaller than it actually is. So the hardest setting is slightly too hard for the road. I think it's probably more designed for track. The only thing about the settings I would have probably preferred is to have the softest setting slightly softer, just to give that extra ride comfort. Now we are thinking about developing a set of dampers with Bilstein on our own and change some of the damping settings to make it slightly more compliant, because we think people are going to be using this setup more for road use. Not everyone goes on the track, and it will still be suitable for occasional track use should you require that. Now remember, this car is a competition pack car, so the suspension is already improved over the standard E92 M3. Just so much joy to drive this. And the reason I love E92 in general is because I think it has the right amount of power in NA form, with a stage 2 running about 450. It's very progressive, it's very playful. But so I've got the suspension in soft now, so you can see it's very compliant over this surface. And when you come into corners, it'll still do what you want it to do, but just in the mode up from there, I think that works really well on these twisty roads. It almost feels like the car's had a set of stiffer anti-roll bars fitted when it hasn't. The suspension keeps the car really flat through the corners. I'm actually really happy with it, but I think there is probably a bit of room for improvement on the softer settings. So I'll speak to Bilstein about what's possible there. And also, these dampers, a lot of people have been complaining that the car does sit higher with them than on the stock dampers, and we have set of lowering springs on the car which have lowered the car, but not to their usual space. I'm not sure how much more it's going to settle, so I think we can probably develop a set of springs to go with the dampers that actually gives a nicer ride height, but we can have different variations on that. So let us know in the comments, should we develop this platform a little bit further and develop our own setup using the EDC dampers and some custom matching springs for those who are using the cars mainly on the road. So that's it for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please remember to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. If you want to join the conversation, please drop a comment below and we'll try our best to respond to you. If you want to watch more of this project, you can do so over here. If you want to watch what YouTube thinks you might like from our other content, you can do so over here.